We will give it about a minute here, but I hope everyone can hear us, and thank you for joining us. It's a lovely Friday morning, at least here in Pennsylvania. I hope it is for all of you out there as well. We have a great group of panelists today who are joining us. We're very privileged to have such a great group. We are pleased to be joined as well in the audience by so many great practitioners, low-income taxpayer clinic practitioners, among others. We're talking today about the anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act. So, as everyone, I suspect, in this audience knows, in August of 2022, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law, a major climate, health, tax, energy law that includes $80 billion in additional funding for the Internal Revenue Service. The law also includes expanded and extended tax credits for energy efficiency and alternative energies as part of a larger effort to combat climate change. As far as we are concerned in the tax community, especially as it comes to the rights of low-income taxpayers and the service that taxpayers receive, that is going to be a major focus of this presentation, and that is the element of the law that we have most been concerned about and that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, really. So to that effect, we're joined by several people here who are experts in that field and are going to talk to us about it, and we're going to take some questions as well. We'll take questions at the end, probably about 15 minutes, but also feel free to put your questions in the chat, and during the time, we will get to some of the questions as well. We'll check after each objective that we're going to be talking about, and certainly if there's something quickly that we can answer, we'll do it. So first of all, my name is Omeed Firouzi, pronouns he, him. I'm a staff attorney at, actually, I'm a professor of practice at Temple Law School. I was a staff attorney at Philadelphia Legal Assistance in their low-income taxpayer clinic for 5 years. And then as of July 24th, I've been a professor of practice and director of the low-income taxpayer clinic at Temple Law School. So I have some experience myself, 5 years representing low-income taxpayers. And I am also a vice chair of the ABA Pro Bono and Tax Clinics Committee, which is delivering this webinar here to you. I'm so used to in saying in these fireside and poolside chats that I'm a staff attorney at Philadelphia Legal Assistance that I almost accidentally said that. But I welcome all of my fellow LITC lawyers here. We're also joined by Carollynn Lear, who is co-lead of the IRS Inflation Reduction Act Strategic Operating Plan Initiative 1.9 to ensure that taxpayers understand and claim appropriate credits and deductions. Prior to her joining the IRS a little over a year ago, she was at the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration for almost 10 years. And in about half of that time, she was in the appointed role of assistant commissioner. She has a JD in tax LLM from Boston University. And we're also joined as well by Scott Irick, who is a project director and co-lead for the Inflation Reduction Act Strategic Operating Plan Initiative 1.9, similarly in charge of ensuring taxpayers understand and claim appropriate credits and deductions. And Scott has 39 years of experience with the IRS, having previously served as director, examination, deputy director of examination, and also working in field and campus policy, in technical support in the SBSC division, as well as in filing and payment compliance. He worked in Andover and compliance services in the wage and investment division, and he's a graduate of the 2011 Candidate Development Program. And we're also pleased actually today to be joined by Richard Furlong, who is a senior stakeholder liaison through IRS Communications and Liaison here in Pennsylvania. So he works with me often. He's a key partner in the Philadelphia area. I've been privileged to join him at some chats about the Inflation Reduction Act in Philadelphia in person, in fact. So we thank you all for joining today, and we're going to be sharing slides here. I think first we're going to talk to, we're going to have Carollynn address us about her objectives and what she's working on and what she wants to share. And Carollynn, let me know when it's time to do a new slide.
Sure, well, thanks, Omeed, and thanks all for joining. It's really exciting to be here in front of you all. I feel like I'm with kindred spirits as we sort of set off to improve the taxpayer experience now that the IRS is sort of enjoying the fruits of the really once-in-a-lifetime investment that Congress has made in our operations. I think Omeed did a really nice job of getting us started as it relates to how we got here. When Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act and it was signed into law. Since August, the IRS has sort of embarked on a pretty transformational process of outlining our plan for how the IRS was going to use or is going to use that once-in-a-lifetime investment to really transform IRS operations. And the end result of that work was an IRA strategic operating plan that was published in April of this year. And that plan outlines in some level of detail how the IRS intends to use Congress's investment in our operations to transform the taxpayers' experience. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. The work of, what's probably now hundreds of IRS employees taking that April strategic operating plan and translating it into real improvements in the way the IRS operates and hopefully improvements to the taxpayers' experience when they're interacting with us. And so what you have on your screen now is the IRS's mission. The IRS's mission hasn't changed with IRA funding. We're just hopefully going to start doing things a little bit differently, and dare I say, a little bit better as we start to embark on this process of transforming. And so you can move along to slide 3. And so, what this slide is showing is really how the IRS is viewing our work in tax administration. It's really sort of a two-sided coin. On the one hand, the IRS collects trillions, trillions of dollars each year, funding the overwhelming majority of government operations. And that's, of course, very, very important to why we exist as an executive branch organization. But on the other side of that coin, the IRS delivers, hundreds of congressionally enacted benefits to citizens through the administration of credits and deductions. I think that was never more apparent than during the COVID pandemic when we were responsible for distributing economic impact payments. And sort of spoiler alert, this is where Scott and I are spending most of our time in this space of benefits delivery. And so, we're really excited, and it's really important to us to elevate the profile of credits and deductions administration within the overall spectrum of work that the IRS is performing. We can proceed to 4. And so this slide here is really talking about, how things got so bad. It's kind of a bummer, but, years of limited resources have resulted in significant issues that have needed to be addressed at the IRS. And as a result, the agency hasn't been able to provide taxpayers with the customer service that they expect or the customer service that they deserve. As you know, with your clients, there are many instances where this has resulted in taxpayers struggling to get the basic services and help that they need when they're trying to navigate tax compliance, navigate their receipt of certain benefits, and understanding the laws that they're required to comply with. that has definitely been exacerbated by outdated technology that creates significant challenges for not just taxpayers, but also IRS employees when they're attempting to serve taxpayers. The IRS is certainly behind most organizations when it comes to investment in technology, and then add on top of that audit rates that are at historic lows, which certainly, impacts that other side of the coin that we highlighted, the compliance side of the coin. And as a result, not everyone is paying their fair share due to that historically low audit rate. And of course, sort of the headline is the inventory backlog that the IRS has had over the course of the last couple of years that certainly has impacted both taxpayer service and compliance. Move to the next slide. So what you have on the screen now is sort of a macro level vision statement that has guided the work of the IRS as we've undertaken the process of creating a strategic vision for transforming the organization. I mean, at a high level, these are the things you would hope to see. We want to make it easier for taxpayers and help them get it right the first time. There's a desire to address that non-compliance that has proliferated due to historically low audit rates. We certainly want to be an organization that attracts top talent, and there's maybe nothing more critical than the IRS meeting its mission than our ability to do just that. And of course, we want to better serve taxpayers. Moving on to slide 6. So sort of in practice, what that all means as it relates to serving taxpayers and retaining talent and improving technology is, in practice, the IRS just needs to have a class of customer service that's similar in capacity and capability to how you might interact with your chosen financial institution out in the private sector. We need to operate with the capacity to complete the sophisticated work that we're expected to complete. This means human capital resources that can really unpack complex tax filings and modern technology to efficiently do all of our work. We'll go to 7. So, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act was enacted last August. And there was an acknowledgement within the organization that as we undertook the more comprehensive planning process, we couldn't wait for the completion of that process to start improving some areas of IRS operations. Our initial efforts focused in on filing season and ensuring that this most recent filing season was substantially different than the last couple of filing seasons that had been substantially impacted with COVID and staffing issues and investment issues. So hopefully you and your clients have noticed some improvement during filing season. We've also seen some initial improvements as it relates to standing up additional improvements with digital and electronic options for taxpayers to engage with the IRS, and that certainly is expected to grow over the coming months and years as this work continues. We can move on to 8. So sort of structurally, if you were to open up the IRS Inflation Reduction Act Strategic Operating Plan, you could really bucket that work into 5 what we are calling objectives, and they're up on your screen now. The first 3 objectives are really sort of mission-related tax administration objectives. One is to improve taxpayer service. 2 is really to address taxpayer issues more quickly, and the ideal being addressing a taxpayer issue at the point of filing. The third is to expand enforcement. And then the last two are more foundational, related to our ability to successfully complete 1, 2, and 3. 4 is to deliver really a drastically improved technology experience, both to our external users, taxpayers, when they attempt to engage with us in that fashion, but also for our employees so that they can really much more efficiently serve taxpayers as they do their day-to-day job. And then 5, of course, is to rebuild the IRS's workforce with a focus on the much more sophisticated work that IRS needs to do in the enforcement space, as well as some focus on rebuilding taxpayer services, where recruitment and attrition has been problematic. All right, we can move on to slide 9 now. And so this is where I'm going to sort of start getting into the substance of the 5 objectives. Scott and I are working on objective 1, which is the taxpayer services objective, and more specifically 1.9, with a focus on credits and deductions. What you will see on the screen here now is sort of a high-level overview of what objective 1 seeks to accomplish. But I mean, in brief, I said it before, it's really a private sector comparable customer service experience when taxpayers are interacting with the IRS. And we can sort of get into the details and move to slide 10. And so the 5 objectives in the IRS's Inflation Reduction Act strategic operating plan are each broken down into more discrete initiatives. Within the taxpayer services objective, you see on the screen the 12 initiatives that we are sort of working in the confines of that objective. Although this presentation doesn't contemplate it, I'm going to dwell on these for a little bit because I understand that this is really the area where the folks listening in today have the most interest. I'll highlight a few of the initiatives, and you can feel free to sort of poke or probe at any of the other ones in the chats and questions, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. I think 1.1 in the upper corner of the screen is listed first as a reason for a reason in the taxpayer services objective. This work is really directly related to creating a tangible and immediate improvement to taxpayer experience. This includes things like fully staffing and, dare I say, even expanding taxpayer assistance centers, expanding the availability of automated assistance options like voice bots and chat bots, so that when you have a simple question, you're not having to wait online for a long time to speak to a human, when you can very easily pop that question into a voice bot or chat bot and perhaps get an immediate answer. And then numerous other really important technology and functionality improvements for our customer service employees, so that when you are, talking to them on the phone, they're able to more efficiently and more completely address your issue or your question or concern. This is one of those areas where the investment in improvements really predates the strategic operating plan, because the work in this space really directly impacts filing season and the customer service the agency is able to provide during filing season. I'd also highlight 1.4, which is another huge initiative within the taxpayer service framework, which is improving taxpayers' self-service experience. What this entails is hopefully rolling out very quickly some new functionality in the various online accounts that you might use when interacting with the IRS. There's a tax pro, an individual online account, and then a business online account. And, to be fair, the functionalities in those accounts is not comparable to what you might experience, for example, in your bank's online portal. The functionality is relatively limited. It's wonderful and it can be helpful, but it's not, full spectrum self-service within an online account. And this initiative is focusing in on very quickly rolling out new functionalities in those accounts so that, in the hopefully not too distant future, it will indeed be similar to what you encounter when you're engaging with your bank online. Another, I think, huge component of the work of this initiative is improvements to irs.gov. I'm sure that you have clients who the first place they went to get their question or issue answered was irs.gov, and perhaps they did not have the best experience, were not able to find the answer to the question. And so that's why they arrive sitting with you, weeks or months later, trying to get the right answer. And so we acknowledge that a huge component of serving taxpayers is making it easier for them to find the answers that they would like to have online so that they never even need to enter the world of reaching out to the IRS, getting on a phone line and waiting, or entering a chatbot to ask a question. Several of the other initiatives on this list are intended to give taxpayers better access to information, such as their own tax data in Initiative 1.6, as well as the status of their interactions with the IRS. I think a huge reason why we see entry into the customer service world is because a taxpayer wants to understand the status of their interaction with the IRS. I think "Where's my refund" is the classic example where the taxpayer just simply wants to know the status of their refund, and the information that they're able to find online is quite thin. And so a lot of our efforts have been to answer those simple questions through non-human channels, through tools online, so that the folks who make it through the phone queue are the people who really need to talk to a human being. And then sort of looking forward into the future, there's definitely a hope to also start communicating with taxpayers a bit more proactively rather than reactively. So, for example, are there reminders that we can send taxpayers proactively to help them with their tax compliance activity, to prevent them from missing a deadline and then being in a compliance work stream where they would probably prefer not to find themselves? Moving on to sort of the work that Scott and I are really focusing on in Initiative 1.9, I'll dwell here for a minute because that's what Scott and I are most involved in. But I also think it's something that's probably pretty deeply important to you and the clients that you're serving. Is Scott and I are specifically working to help taxpayers better understand and claim the credits and deductions that they might qualify for. This is the second side of the coin that I was talking about, the administration of the benefits that Congress has enacted. And I'll just chat through some of the aspects of what we're working on currently and what we're aspiring to. One area that we're focusing on is just the availability of VITA and LITC and other free assistance services that are available to our most vulnerable citizens, who do simply need assistance claiming a benefit. We're evaluating where there might be geographic or other gaps in the availability of those services, and trying to evaluate what the IRS needs to do in that space to make sure that there aren't gaps and that everyone who needs and qualifies for a free service is able to obtain it within a reasonable location of where they reside at the moment. we're also in the position of sort of advocating on behalf of taxpayers who are entitled to certain benefits, credits, or deductions in all of the various other work of the other initiatives. So I think a good example of this is that, Scott and I aren't responsible for developing all of the various self-help tools that are being considered for implementation, but we're certainly in those conversations, making sure that folks are paying attention to taxpayers who may need to claim a credit or deduction to receive a benefit as part of the conversation of those build outs. Internally, we're also evaluating what sorts of barriers exist for taxpayers when they might attempt to claim a credit or deduction. And then once we sort of inventory and prioritize those barriers, we're going to undertake the process of removing them. And so hopefully there'll be, a large volume of areas where we can just make it easier for folks to claim or credit a credit or deduction going forward. And there's certainly a number of lessons learned that we will take from the COVID economic impact period and translate that hopefully to improvements in other areas of benefits administration. And then the last thing I'll highlight here is we're trying to think really thoughtfully about how we can do public outreach and education better in the credits and deductions space. I think our take at the moment is that a lot of education and outreach happens currently, but there's some really obvious places where that education and outreach isn't landing. And we really want to hone in on those hard to reach demographics and make sure those hard to reach demographics that are frankly probably some of the most needy in the realm of benefits administration, and make sure that we are doing everything we can to reach those folks to get them the benefits that they qualify for. That also includes making sure that the communications that we do send out are understandable, in plain English, available in other languages, that all of our taxpayers can understand. And so I think this is a space in particular. One, I'll pause at this point to ask Omeed if there are questions in the chat that he wants to raise, but also I would say, also an area where we're looking for thoughts and input, and happy to receive that as well. I'm sure Omeed can send us everything that's in the chat at the end of this.
Well, there are no questions right now in the chat. It's all very encouraging, I should say, especially things like delivering proactive alerts or building status tracking tools for taxpayers. I was just talking to my class about that actually on Wednesday, about how people at the IRS have said that they ideally want to get to a position with this additional funding where it could be like a Domino's pizza tracker that, that shows you like what stage you're at in terms of the processing of a form or a return. And I know, certain other agencies in government have things like that. Being able to talk online in a quick customer chat with somebody, with an agent about something, also a really helpful thing. And having that availability and accessibility and having the digital services. I mean, I think that's already been something that's been very helpful, of making sure that returns are digitally processed, including amended returns or older year fresh returns people file. And of course, the phone service as well has been dramatically improved this year. But I don't see any questions yet. I'm just encouraged that all these things are goals that the IRS has in terms of how they're going to use this additional funding to actually improve services for taxpayers, because these are a lot of the things that we've been asking for a while, or hoping would happen. And so that's really good.
Yeah. All right, so I'll continue on, we'll go over the next 4 objectives a bit more quickly, just because I went a bit more deeply into the objective ones because it's nearest to my heart and my work currently. Objective 2 is focused in on faster issue resolution for taxpayers. I think the one thing that we all need to sort of pause and acknowledge is that you and I deal with taxes as part of our everyday lives, but for your average person, it's pretty complex and stressful. And so when an issue arises that the taxpayer can't quickly identify, and when the fix of the issue is time consuming and takes, months, that stress certainly lingers. And I think we all acknowledge that as folks in tax administration, that it is better not just for us, but also better for the taxpayer when these complex tax issues that a taxpayer might encounter can be resolved much more quickly than what they're resolved currently. So we can move on to slide 12. So the goal of objective 2 is to identify more clearly and quickly any taxpayer issues as they arise, and also to resolve them much more quickly. And this work really looks at all stages of the taxpayer's interaction with the IRS. In a perfect world, an issue on a tax return, for example, would be identified clearly with steps to resolve that issue at the point of filing, right? And so that's great for the IRS because we don't ever have that tax return that would otherwise require some form of human treatment to resolve the issue. That goes away if we can identify the issue at the point of filing and help the taxpayer resolve it right there. It's also good for the taxpayer because they don't have to continue to interact with the IRS over the coming months and weeks if they need to resolve the issue. Also included within this work is to improve our notices, which admittedly is no small task in and of itself. So oftentimes I'm shown a notice that a taxpayer might receive to resolve an issue, a simple issue that is 2 or 3 pages long because of all of the various legalese and complex language that's included. I think there's a real desire internally, and I'm sure also externally, to improve the notices coming from the IRS, and then also really improving the collections process for those taxpayers that need it. I think there's some probably very high value work in the collection space related to proactive alerts and reminding taxpayers that their payment is due and sending taxpayers a confirmation that their payment was received. And so I think, to be fair, you could call much of the work in objective 2 a continuation of the taxpayer services objective, right? Because these are all services that a taxpayer might expect to see, for example, if they were interacting with their credit card company. That's all I had planned to say about objective 2, but if there are questions in the chat, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll pass it over to Scott to delve a bit more deeply into enforcement.
So there are some questions, it looks like. All right, so we have Jen Gardner asking, Commissioner Werfel, I didn't see that he had an announcement today, but I did see that I wonder what specifically that was about, but I did see that he said earlier this week that they would do fewer EITC audits and they would end practices that were, in fact, auditing Black taxpayers at higher rates, and that they were going to focus on making sure that there was improved service and going after wealthy tax cheats. But he talked about some of those things in that letter to Senator Wyden, and or she said that Jen said this week, she clarified. So I guess I think that's what she's referring to. So much like his announcement this week, she's wondering, and I think we're all wondering, when the objectives or plans that are mentioned in here would be implemented as the IRS progresses. If there's a timetable or a timeline for that, that's one of the questions that we have. If you can address that first.
Yeah. So specific to the sort of EITC shift, I think you should see a difference there in fiscal 24. That's sort of a right away change. With the remainder of the SOP initiatives, it's really, the funding from the IRA is a 10-year investment currently as contemplated. And so many of those to-do items are sort of phased in over time. And so it would be hard to give sort of a universal answer to that question. I would say if there's anything specifically that you would be interested in knowing when you could expect to see it rolled out, most of the larger initiative deliverables have fiscal year goals listed in the strategic operating plan. But of course, they're varied over at least, I think they go up to fiscal 24. So difficult to give a universal answer to when you could expect to see any given change implemented.
So that's good things to know there. And I guess so. And Jen was saying too. She says, to clarify, it's helpful to get those announcements from the IRS as the changes are made. I often go to irs.gov/newsroom and see good press releases and things like that here. I was happy to see that this letter from Commissioner Werfel got a lot of attention, even on social media and things like that. And so having those real-time announcements as things progress would be really helpful. John Wanchek asks about, we've heard a lot about this from Justin Schweigel, among others, about thoughts about how the IRS can resolve unfair denials of EITC as a result of the destruction of 30 million 1099s, with claims being flagged as income mismatch and misreporting that's happened. If anyone can speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know that I can. I'm not sure I heard the question in there. I'm not sure if it was maybe just more of a comment. But I don't have an answer to that question handy.
Okay. Well, we can continue to go through these slides and get more questions just to make sure we have time for everything. So go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start talking about objective number 3, which deals with compliance enforcement. And I think we were kind of starting to get into that with some of the questions here that were asked, but we are definitely taking steps to ensure fair enforcement of the laws. Everybody needs to feel confident that we're playing by the same rules, and we are spending time and effort to refine our tools to better focus on non-compliant taxpayers, but also respect taxpayers' rights throughout the process. I think you've probably also heard recently coming from the commissioner, more in the emphasis of high dollar non-compliance, such as large corporations, partnerships, high income, high wealth individuals. Again, populations that haven't had coverage, admittedly, over the last decade or so due to the declining resources, which has further exacerbated, so to speak, the tax gap. We're in the hiring mode as well in the enforcement category for accountants and lawyers on the way that we conduct our audits, and hopefully as effectively and as efficiently as possible, which includes increased data analytics and tools such as automated intelligence. And we're also, over the course of the next 10 years, looking to reorganize our compliance functions to create a more centralized compliance function. So next slide. So on your screen are the 7 initiatives under Objective 3. Again, much like Carollynn, I'll touch on just a few of these. The first one under 3.1 is primarily about risk-based case selection in our work plans. For years, our work plans process has been decentralized, where the individual business operating divisions kind of determined their own path forward based on what they felt the needs of their customer base was, as opposed to broad organizational priorities that oftentimes overlap the current BOD functions that we have today. 2, 3, and 4 we already kind of touched on a bit. So 3.5 basically is here to say that there's a pretty large gap between these large businesses and high wealth individuals and the $400,000 mandate, I will just say, that's part of the initiative where we won't increase our coverage in that space, and in fact, it will be declining. But there's a huge gap there that 3.5 is intended to address. 3.6 is really about complex, high risk, and emerging issues. Probably the best example I can give there touches around the dirty dozen and different issues that come about that are identified throughout the year. So we want to stay on the forefront of issues before they become a huge compliance problem to the extent possible. And then 3.7 is all about fairness. And I think the comment that was made with regards to EITC and audits, and I think it was the Stanford study that talked about the bias in some of our case selection algorithms. Again, not intentional. We don't have any of that information on race, any of that in our data, but sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the end result of what those algorithms are identifying. And so part of 3.7 is to ensure that we have a continued process to look at whether our compliance programs are in fact fair and balanced throughout all of our activities and remove any biases that are in the program. So just as a final comment on EITC and the question that was posed, work plans are still being developed for fiscal year 24, but I think I can safely say that the number of EITC examinations will be reduced. There will be more of a focus on due diligence and return preparers and different activities in that space. So I think you will sense, see, or at least feel a little bit different approach to EITC compliance along the lines of what the commissioner outlined in the Wyden letter this next year. All right, let's go on to number 4. Number 4 is all about technology. And quite honestly, I think everybody's heard about the antiquated technology that exists in the IRS, some of the oldest technology within government. So we do need to make dramatic improvements to our infrastructure and modernize the platforms and everything where these programs ultimately reside. So our objective here is really to deliver cutting edge technology, data, and analytics to support not only our efforts, but to address taxpayers' needs as well. So if you want to go, okay, you already navigated to the initiatives. There's the 8 initiatives that are aligned to Objective 4. A number of different elements there. 4.1 again kind of touches on the modernization of our master files. 4.3 talks and gets back to some of the support for Initiative 1, where we're talking about better account access, and the terminology that you might hear is a 360-degree view of the taxpayer's account. So they can see every aspect of what's going on with their account. And quite frankly, our people can see every action and activity that's going on with the taxpayer's account, rather than having to navigate multiple systems or transferring taxpayers just because, I can't answer that question. Expect to see some movement in that arena. Of course, data security is still at the forefront. 4.5 with data utility. The service is putting together what's termed an enterprise data platform that's going to house and leverage all of the data within the service. Let's see, what else? Okay, and then finally, I'll just mention 4.7 here with regards to the use of data. I think one of the examples I can point to there is our National Research Program, or NRP, audits and the case selections over the years. For consistency and comparative reasons, those have stayed pretty static, but we are looking and have incorporated artificial intelligence and other different tools into that process to be something a little bit more than just a totally random audit, which was how that program was driven. There wasn't anything on the return that led you to an NRP audit, but more intentional compliance-based information gathering within that program. So we can go on to objective 5. So 5 really has to do with our workforce. We need to improve, attract, and retain the talent to better serve our taxpayers. Our hiring process is not a simple one by any stretch of the imagination. And then when you factor in years of limited resources, which are start and stop recruiting and hiring, and then we don't even know what our budget is until well into the fiscal year and are able to react at that point. But hiring in and of itself is a challenge, but after we do successfully onboard individuals, the training and their experience afterwards, we need to retain. We spend a lot of time, energy, and whatnot to bring people in. I would say, making sure that we have a positive employee experience for them to want to stay is almost equally, if not more, important. So I think one thing that you will see in the employee space is we will definitely need more employees with technology, data science, and technical tax law skills, and fewer employees that actually handle and process paper and other manual processes. So if you'd like to go on to the next slide, please. That outline.
I just want to note that we have about 7 minutes left. I know there's still a few slides, and just in case there are any questions. So I don't mean to rush you, but just wanted to say that.
Nope, I will land the plane here quickly. I don't know that I really have much to add here in the objective 5 space. The items that are listed there are all basically relatively self-explanatory. We are looking at different policies and procedures about bringing folks in as part of the hiring process. Again, not a complicated thing. Government hiring, very interesting. We did have some flexibilities in that regard during COVID that allowed us to help facilitate the onboarding process. And so, again, just looking to make a better experience, not only for the folks coming in, not have them wait so long, quality training, and career pathing opportunities. IRS is a huge organization, and there's something really for everybody once they get into, if they can get into and get hired by us. So again, just lots of opportunities and good things that our HCO folks, human capital, are taken care of. Then I think the next slide is really about, ensuring that, our workforce reflects the taxpayers that we do ultimately serve. Just as important as ensuring fairness and how we address all the different taxpayer communities. The next slide. How will we know we succeed? I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. The strategic operating plan includes 42 initiatives, 200 milestones, and over 400 different projects. And that's just kind of where we're at today. But again, this is not a race. It's a 10-year journey. And so, some initiatives will be near term, longer term, and activities are still being prioritized, I think, as Carollynn referenced here a little bit ago. So if you want to go to the next slide, there is a transformation strategy office that's overseeing all of these efforts, led by David Pedrino. There's a specific objective lead for each of the 5 objectives. And then there are 42 folks, or a few more, like Carollynn and I, that are actually part of the initiatives that are drilling down into the tenets of the strategic operating plan. So next slide. A little dated here, but it does basically state that we have been working at our levels, Carollynn and my levels, and kind of breaking this all down into tangible, discrete actions that support the vision of the strategic operating plan. And so, as noted there, I think it's the 4th bullet. You'll start to see some things here as fall comes around that show progress, that show we are good stewards of the money that Congress has invested in us for taxpayers. So if we go on to the next slide, I think it's actually maybe the final slide, talks about the progress that's been provided. I think we actually landed level of service on the 1040 line slightly above 85%. At least that's what I think I heard, which of course is a huge improvement. Wait times only 7-8 minutes as opposed to prior filing seasons. Virtually all taxpayers now have a customer callback option. Carollynn talked about online account and new capabilities. Going to see a lot of changes in the individual online account, but also changes being made to business and the Tax Pro tools as well. The document upload tool for correspondence with taxpayers, it references 61 notices that have that option, but you're going to see that number increase exponentially here over the next couple of years. Carollynn talked about the tax and meeting taxpayers more where they are in the communities where they really need the assistance. And then coming from small business, I have to plug Iris a bit, the tool where taxpayers can come in and file their information returns directly with us, and as opposed to the fire and air systems that exist here today. So a more direct interaction from that perspective. So with that, got a couple minutes left for any other questions or chat items. Omeed, happy to ask and answer, or happy to answer whatever we can. And if there's anything else that we didn't get to, or if there's questions that other people have after the end of our presentation, happy to have you forward those and send them to us, and we'll respond accordingly.
Well, thank you. So we have one question here, which is that virtually all, from Nancy Ryan, who says, virtually all government agencies have financial incentives for people in tech fields. Does the IRS do this, and are they authorized to do this for the auditors or attorneys who deal with complex audits for high-income taxpayers and corporations?
We do have those capabilities. We do exercise them to some degree. I don't know that we necessarily do it everywhere that we could or should. Some of that is, again, funding based. Some of it, there are different requirements or limitations, but I guess what I can say is if you're talking about a recruitment incentive, a retention bonus, those types of activities, bringing folks with specific skill sets into the organizations, you will see more of that being expanded in some of those other areas moving forward. Funding's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have. I don't see any. Let's have something here. Let's see. Oh, no, it's just someone. She was just saying thank you for answering the question. So thank you all for joining us. I'm really grateful that you did. I thought this was an excellent conversation. I certainly learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. And we thank you for your service, and we thank everyone for joining us today. And we hope that you have a great weekend.
You as
Thanks
well.
very much.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Bye.